The scream was so sharp and sudden that neighbors later said it sounded like something being ripped apart in the dark. It came from the small apartment on Lancaster Boulevard where Sheila Cabrera lived with her 3 children. It was late, hours after most families had gone to bed. The building was quiet, the street was quiet, and the desert air outside was so still it felt like the whole town had paused. But inside Sheila's apartment, something terrifying was happening. Something no one would understand until it was too late. A loud crash shook the walls, like furniture tipping over or someone slamming hard into it. A child's voice shouted, "Mom? Mom!" Then there was silence. A deep, heavy silence. Moments later, the lights inside the apartment went off, even though the neighbors' lights stayed on. A shadow moved past the window. Then another noise, something dragging. Slow, steady, too heavy to be anything normal. And then nothing. By morning, Sheila was gone. Vanished inside her own home as if the night had swallowed her whole. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. Her bag was by the door. Nothing looked stolen. Nothing looked broken from the outside. But her children were alone in the living room, crying. The police would later call it one of the most shocking disappearances in Lancaster. Friends would say there were signs everyone missed, and the truth behind her final night would break the hearts of everyone who heard it. What really happened in that apartment? Who was inside with her when she screamed? And why did the lights go out right after? The answers would not come easily. But the clues, some small, some frighteningly large, began long before that night. Before everything spiraled into terror, life for Sheila had been like the beginning of a new hopeful chapter. She had moved from Peru years earlier, hoping to build a safer life for her children. Diego, age 10, Camila, age 7, and little Mateo, who was only 4. People who met her said she was warm, gentle, and calm. The kind of person who kept her worries tucked inside her smile. She worked long hours at a local bakery, kneading dough before sunrise, greeting customers with her soft accent, and always rushing home in time to prepare dinner. But life wasn't easy. Money was tight. Rent kept going up. She had no family in the United States, and the father of her children didn't live with them. So when she met Anthony, a man from the same neighborhood who seemed caring at first, she thought she had finally found someone she could trust. Someone who would help her raise the kids, someone steady. But the beginning was the only soft part of that chapter. Over time, Anthony started showing another side. He didn't like her talking to neighbors. He didn't want her working too late. He said he was protecting her, but the kids noticed how her smile had changed. It didn't reach her eyes anymore. She started spending more time inside the apartment. She stopped answering calls from friends. When her coworkers asked if everything was okay, she always said she was tired, just tired. But people can be tired in different ways, and Sheila's tiredness came from fear. One day, Camila told her teacher something strange. When the teacher asked why she was sad, she whispered, "Mom cries when he gets mad." The teacher reported it, but Sheila insisted everything was fine. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want attention. She wanted peace, but peace was the one thing she could not have in that apartment. The days before she disappeared were filled with small moments that didn't seem important until later. On Monday, she came to work with a bruise on her arm. She said it happened when she bumped into the pantry shelf. Her coworkers exchanged looks. They didn't believe her, but they didn't want to push. On Wednesday, her son Diego heard his mom arguing in the kitchen. When he peeked around the corner, he saw Anthony clenching his fist. His face was red, like he was holding back something he was about to explode with. On Thursday night, Sheila searched online for how to get a restraining order and safe places for women. She never got to finish that search, because Friday was the night everything happened. That Friday felt normal when it began. The sun was bright, kids were playing outside, and Sheila was cleaning the apartment like she always did on her day off. The scent of lemon cleaner filled the rooms. She opened the windows to let in the warm air. Neighbors saw her carrying laundry, talking softly to her children, and laughing when little Mateo spilled juice on himself. She looked tired, but she looked like she was trying. Always trying. But around 6 p.m., a neighbor saw Anthony arriving. He wasn't smiling. His shoulders were tense. He walked into the building quickly, not greeting anyone. Sheila's face changed when he entered the apartment. She wasn't expecting him. Her children felt the shift immediately. They could sense when the air in the room changed. They went quiet. Dinner was silent. No jokes. No stories. The kids ate quickly. After they went to bed, the arguing started. At first it was just voices, low, sharp. Then louder. Then loud enough that the people in the next apartment turned down their TV because they could hear every word. "You think I don't know? I just want to leave, that's all. Please. You're not going anywhere." A door slammed. Something hit the floor. The kids woke up and huddled together. Around 11 p.m., the building was quiet again. Anthony left the apartment briefly. No one knows where he went during that time. But he came back, minutes before the scream. The police would later say the timeline of that night was tight and chilling. Everything happened between 11:17 p.m. and 11:49 p.m., according to neighbor statements and a camera down the street. Inside the apartment, Sheila tried to call someone, maybe for help, maybe just for comfort, but the call never connected. Her phone screen later showed, attempted call, 11:21 p.m. The kids were awake. They heard everything. They heard footsteps moving fast. They heard a chair break. They heard breathing that didn't sound normal. And they heard their mother say, "Please," not in front of them. Then came the scream that shook the whole building. Not a short scream. Not a startled scream. A deep, terrified scream. Seconds later, the lights went out. Not the whole building, just Sheila's apartment. The hallway camera caught Anthony stepping into the hall for a moment. Just a shadow, but enough that investigators later froze the frame and studied it. Then he went back inside. What happened in the next 15 minutes would only be guessed at later. But it was enough to make even the officers who worked the case say they couldn't sleep for days. Inside, something heavy moved along the floor. Something was dragged. Then there was silence, and Sheila was never seen again. When morning came, the kids were found alone, confused, scared, and asking for their mom. They said she had been there the night before. They said she screamed. They said the lights turned off. They said Anthony left before the sun came up. But when neighbors went to check, the door to the apartment was half open. The living room was messy. A lamp was knocked down. A plate was broken. And Sheila was gone. Her shoes, still by the door. Her purse, still on the counter. Her keys, hanging on the hook like always. Nothing was taken. Nothing looked like a robbery. Nothing explained how someone could vanish in their own home without anyone seeing them leave. By the time police arrived, the neighbors were gathered outside, whispering, shaking their heads, asking the same question. How does a mother disappear in her own apartment without a trace? But that morning held one more surprise. One more detail no one expected. Something that turned a simple missing person report into something far darker. Because behind the couch, hidden from view, officers found something that made them stop cold. Something that made them call for backup immediately. Something that showed Sheila's disappearance was not an accident. It was a warning, and it changed everything. What they found would become the key to the entire case. When the officer kneeling behind the couch spotted the small object tucked into the shadows, he froze. His flashlight beam shook a little as he leaned closer, calling out to his partner in a tight voice. "Hey, come look at this." The second officer hurried over, thinking maybe it was just a toy one of the kids dropped or a broken piece of furniture. But when he saw it, he inhaled sharply. It was a blood-stained hair tie, bright red, fresh, and wrapped tightly around several strands of long dark hair. Hair that looked exactly like Sheila's. The room went silent. The officers exchanged a look that said everything without a single word. Something violent had happened here. Something serious. Something that turned this from a missing person case into a possible crime scene. One officer quickly radioed the station. "We need detectives here, ASAP. Possible evidence of assault. Scene not secure." The kids, Diego, Camila, and little Mateo, watched from the hallway, still in their pajamas, confused and scared. "Is our mom coming home?" Diego asked, trying to sound brave even though his voice trembled. The officer didn't know how to answer. Instead, he placed a gentle hand on Diego's shoulder and said, "We're going to find her. I promise." But inside, he wasn't sure at all. Not after finding that hair tie. Not after hearing the neighbors talk about a terrible scream. Not after seeing how the apartment looked like a storm had passed through only one room. There was more to this. Something deeper. Something hidden. And the truth was just beginning to show itself. Detectives arrived within 20 minutes. 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing gloves and calm expressions. The kind of calm that comes from years of seeing things most people never want to imagine. Detective Harris, the lead investigator, stepped inside slowly, absorbing every detail of the small apartment. The broken lamp, the dent in the wall, the trail on the floor that looked like something heavy had been dragged. He knelt beside the hair tie and whispered, "This was pulled out during a struggle." Then he looked toward the children. Fear shined in their eyes, and they held onto each other tightly. "Let's get them somewhere safe," he told one of the officers. "Someplace quiet." The kids were taken to a neighbor's apartment, away from the chaos. But even from there, they could hear the sounds of footsteps rushing in and out of their home. While detectives worked inside, police questioned neighbors. One neighbor, Mrs. Owens, said she heard the scream around 11:30 p.m. Another said she heard a man's voice yelling. Another mentioned seeing a shadow move past the hallway window. But the most troubling detail came from a neighbor living on the floor below. "I heard footsteps after the scream," he said. "Slow ones, going back and forth. Then it sounded like something dragged across the floor. It wasn't furniture. It sounded heavier." Detective Harris scribbled the details in his notebook. Every word mattered. "Did you see anyone leave the apartment?" "No," the neighbor said. "But the lights went off. Just in that one home. Everything else was normal." This bothered Harris. People don't usually turn off their lights right after a scream. Unless they don't want to be seen. Or unless they're trying to hide something. Inside the apartment, the forensic team started their search. They checked the kitchen, normal. The kids' bedroom, toys scattered, nothing strange. The hallway, small scratch marks on the wall like someone brushed against it too hard. The bathroom, a towel on the floor, and 1 drop of blood near the sink. Just 1 drop, but that single drop could tell a story. "Baggett," one of the technicians said. "The living room was the worst part. The broken plate, the knocked-over furniture, the long scrape mark on the floor leading toward the hallway." Detective Harris followed the mark with his eyes. It went from the living room to the hallway, then turned sharply toward the master bedroom. That bedroom door was closed. "Everyone step back," Harris said quietly. He pushed the door open slowly. The room looked calm at first glance. Bed neatly made. Curtains still open. A soft blanket folded at the foot of the bed. But then he spotted something odd. The rug near the bed was crooked, like it had been moved in a hurry. He bent down and lifted it. Under the rug, he found a fresh smear of blood. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to show Sheila was hurt. Enough to show someone tried to hide it. His stomach tightened. This was no simple disappearance. This was no accident. Someone wanted Sheila gone. And they didn't want anyone to know what happened in that room. While detectives were still searching, the kids were questioned gently by a trained child interviewer. Little Mateo said, "Mommy was crying last night." Camila said, "She told us to stay in the room." But Diego, older, more aware, said something the detectives would not forget. "He came back," Diego whispered, "after he left the first time. He came back and he was angry." "Who came back?" the interviewer asked. "Anthony." The room went quiet. Diego continued. "Mama told him she wanted to leave. She said she wanted us to be safe. What did Anthony say? He said, "You're not going anywhere." Detective Harris, who listened from outside the room, clenched his jaw. He had seen cases like this before. Cases where leaving was the most dangerous choice. Cases where someone believed they owned another person. And those cases almost never ended peacefully. Now Anthony was no longer just a person of interest. He was the last adult to see Sheila alive. He argued with her hours before she vanished. He left the apartment before sunrise. And he was gone. Nowhere to be found. His phone off. His car missing. He ran. People only run when they have something to hide. Detective Harris ordered officers to start searching the area around the apartment complex. The dumpsters, the bushes, the nearby alley. They found nothing. Not at first. But at 3:17 p.m., an officer called out, "Detective, over here." He pointed to a small patch of dirt near the edge of the parking lot. Something shiny stuck out of the ground, half buried, as if dropped in a hurry. Harris picked it up with gloves. It was Sheila's necklace, the one she wore every day, the one she never took off, the one her children said she was wearing the night before. He felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. Sheila didn't leave this behind willingly. Someone ripped it off. Someone dropped it. Someone made a mistake. But that wasn't the only mistake. Because a dog walker passing near the far side of the apartment complex said something that made Harris stop in his tracks. "I saw a car around 4 a.m., the woman said. A dark SUV. It was parked near the bushes. A man was loading something into the back. Looked like something long. Like a roll of carpet or something wrapped." "Did you see his face?" Harris asked, heart pounding. The woman nodded slowly. "Yes. I know him. It was Anthony." The world seemed to hold its breath. This was no longer a missing person case. This was no longer a question of what happened. It was now a race. A race to find Sheila before something worse happened. A race to find Anthony before he disappeared forever. Detective Harris ordered every available patrol car to spread out across Lancaster. Search the roads. Search the gas stations. Search the highways. Because now they had a suspect, a timeline, evidence, and a witness. But the most shocking discovery of the day hadn't been made yet. Not until one officer checked the security camera of a small store a block away. He brought the footage to the detective. "Sir, you need to see this." Harris leaned over the laptop as the video played. The timestamp read 2:46 a.m. A dark SUV drove past the store. The headlights flashed, and in the passenger seat, in the split second of light, was a shape, a human shape, slump, not moving, wrapped in something, and it wasn't Anthony. Detective Harris's blood ran cold. He zoomed in, breath held tight. The shape, the hair, the outline, it looked like a woman. The detective stared at the screen, jaw tightening. "Dear God," he whispered. "Is that Sheila?" The room was silent. Everyone watching the footage felt the same chill. But the truth would become even darker. Because just seconds later in the video, something happened that no one expected. The SUV slowed. The passenger's head shifted. Just an inch. Barely visible. But it moved. Which meant only one thing. Sheila might still be alive. The room went silent as the grainy security footage looped over and over. Each time, Sheila's faint movement became harder to deny. Her head dipped just slightly, almost like someone who was trying to stay awake, or someone drifting in and out of consciousness. Detective Harris leaned in closer, eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "That wasn't a trick of the light," he said quietly. "She moved. She's alive in this footage." One of the officers swallowed hard. If this is 2:46 a.m., then she was still alive hours after the scream. The thought hit everyone at once. The dragging sound, the lights going off, the movement in the hallway, the dark SUV leaving before sunrise. Sheila hadn't vanished into thin air. She had been taken, and the person who took her wasn't trying to hide that she was injured. He was trying to hide that she was still alive. Harris exhaled slowly, the weight of what this meant sinking in. "We're not searching for a body," he said. "We're searching for a living victim." The team sprang into action, adrenaline replacing the heavy dread that had filled the apartment all morning. Officers spread maps across the kitchen counter. They marked the store location, the apartment, and the possible direction of the SUV. "We need every camera along this road checked," Harris ordered. If that SUV passed one store, it passed others. Still, the video left one burning question. Where was Anthony taking Sheila at nearly 3 in the morning? As the police expanded their search, the kids were kept at the station under supervision. Diego held Camila's hand. Mateo played silently with a toy truck an officer had given him. "Is our mom okay?" Camila asked softly. A young detective knelt down to their eye level. "We're doing everything we can to bring her back. She loves you all very much." "But she didn't come tuck us in," Mateo whispered. "She always tucks us in." The innocence of his words made the detective pause. Even hardened cops felt a sting in their chest hearing it. Diego stared down at his shoes, guilt flooding his eyes. "It's my fault," he said. "I should have done something." "No," the detective said firmly. "You're a child. What happened is not your fault." But Diego didn't look convinced. Back at the apartment, new evidence emerged. A fingerprint on the light switch. Another on the inside of the bedroom door. Both identified by the system as belonging to Anthony. But that wasn't surprising. What was surprising came from the bathroom. One of the forensic techs called Harris over. "Sir, we found something you need to see." On the side of the bathroom sink, nearly invisible to the naked eye, were 4 small scratches. Thin, light, but placed close together. "Could be damage from cleaning supplies," one tech said. But another shook her head. "No. These look like fingernail marks. Human fingernails. They were fresh, not even a day old. Someone tried to hold onto the sink. Someone tried to fight. Someone was scared. And that someone was almost certainly Sheila." The tech slowly traced the marks, imagining the desperation behind them. "It looks like she was trying to stand up or trying not to be pulled," she whispered. Harris closed his eyes. Every new detail painted a clearer picture, and it was getting harder to think Sheila left that apartment willingly. In fact, it was nearly impossible. But if she was resisting, what exactly did Anthony do between the scream and the moment security footage caught them leaving? Detectives worked fast, pulling footage from gas stations, bus stops, stores, and street cameras along the main road. Most cameras caught nothing useful. Some were pointed too high. Others were covered in dust. Some hadn't worked in years. They were losing hope, until they reached a camera near the outskirts of the city. It belonged to a small auto repair shop. The owner, an older man named Mr. Turner, said it didn't always record clearly, but he would show them whatever he had. He slid his laptop around. "This camera points toward the road," he explained. "Catches cars leaving town." The footage loaded. Cars passed by slowly in the early morning hours. A few trucks, a taxi, an empty police cruiser. Then, at 3:12 a.m., a dark SUV sped past. The same model. The same missing hubcap on the back right tire. The same dent near the front bumper. "It's him," Harris said. The SUV was heading away from the main city. Away from neighborhoods. Away from lights. Into the dark outskirts. "Where does this road lead?" the female detective asked. Turner scratched his chin. "Well, mostly open land. Some abandoned buildings from back when the area was being developed. A few dirt roads. Not much else." Harris felt a chill run through him. People who want to disappear, or make someone disappear, drive toward places like that. "Send units," he said immediately. "Get drones in the air if possible." Every minute counted now. While the search expanded outside the city, detectives continued digging into Anthony's history. They needed to know what he was capable of. What they found was troubling. A previous girlfriend had filed a restraining order. Police had been called once for a domestic dispute. He worked odd jobs and had been fired several times. Neighbors described him as nice at first, then different. And one detail stood out. He was familiar with the isolated areas outside of Lancaster. He had gone camping out there. He once lived near an abandoned construction site. Harris underlined that note in red ink. That might be where he took her, he said softly. But then something unexpected happened. Around 5 p.m., the front doors of the police station swung open. A woman rushed inside, out of breath, panic in her eyes. She was clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her steady. "I need to talk to whoever is handling the Sheila Cabrera case," she cried. The officers brought her to Harris. "My name is Elena," she said, chest still rising and falling fast. "I'm Sheila's coworker. I know something. I didn't think it mattered yesterday, but now I think it could be important." "Tell me everything," Harris said. She nodded quickly. "Yesterday, during lunch, Sheila told me she was planning to leave him. She said she had a plan. She said she had documents. She said she finally had what she needed to protect the kids." "What kind of documents?" Harris asked. "I don't know, but she said they proved something. Something about Anthony." "Did she say where she kept these documents?" Elena thought for a moment. "She said she hid them somewhere safe. Somewhere he'd never think to look." Harris stood abruptly. If Sheila had evidence against Anthony, that could be the motive. Something worth silencing her over. Something worth keeping her from sharing. But if she hid them, somewhere he'd never think to look. Where? The apartment had been searched already. Unless... Harris's eyes widened. Unless she didn't hide them inside the apartment. "Get the team back there," he ordered. "Search outside. Every corner. Every vent. Every mailbox. Every storage area." Within minutes, officers were combing the outside of the building. Behind bushes. Inside the shared laundry room. Near the electric meters. Under the stairs. Behind the dumpster. Nothing. Then one officer called out, "Detective, I think I found something." He was kneeling beside the far corner of the building, near a loose panel in the siding. It covered a tiny space barely wide enough for a cat. The officer carefully pulled the panel open, and inside was a plastic grocery bag. Harris took it himself, hands steady, heart pounding. Inside the bag were 3 envelopes, all labeled with Sheila's handwriting. One said, "For the police." Another said, "For my children." The last one said, "If something happens to me." Everyone standing there felt their stomachs sink. Sheila had been scared. Scared enough to prepare letters. Scared enough to hide them outside her own home. Scared enough to think something might happen. Harris opened the first envelope slowly. His eyes widened as he read. The papers, the photos, the note. It was evidence. Clear, dangerous evidence. Evidence that proved something huge about Anthony, something he would do anything to hide. "Get this to the lab now," he said sharply. "This changes everything." But before he could take the next step, before they could process the documents, before they could even catch their breath, a call came in. A 911 caller. Panicked, shaking, terrified. She had just seen something out near the abandoned construction site. Something she couldn't explain. Something that made her cry as she spoke. I think I saw a woman," she said. "She was lying on the ground. I think she's hurt or worse." The operator asked her to stay calm. "What else did you see?" The woman breathed heavily. "A man," she whispered. "A man dragging her behind an old building." The station exploded into motion. Cars were started. Lights flashed. Radios crackled. Officers sprinted into the parking lot. And Harris, gripping the letters Sheila left behind, whispered the words everyone felt but didn't dare say aloud. "We're running out of time." Anthony stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide, and the phone shaking in his hand as the officer on the line asked him to repeat himself. But Anthony couldn't speak. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. It was as if his throat had frozen shut. Behind him, the apartment felt colder than before, even though the heater was humming softly. The feeling in the air was thick, heavy, wrong. Something evil had happened inside that home, and at that moment, Anthony finally knew it. The officer's voice pushed through the silence again. "Sir? Are you still there? You said you found blood." Anthony swallowed hard. "Why, yes. There's a lot of it. Is anyone in the apartment with you?" He looked around the dim living room. "No. I'm alone. Do not touch anything. Do not move anything. Officers are on the way right now. Stay on the line if you can." But Anthony couldn't. His hand trembled so much the phone slipped, hit the floor, and the call disconnected. The apartment was silent again, except for the soft ticking of the hallway clock. Tick, tick, tick. Anthony backed away from the doorway to Sheila's small room. He had only seen a glimpse before, just a smear of red on the floor, but he knew it wasn't something small. He forced himself to step closer again. His heart pounded so loud it felt like it was shaking his chest. He turned the light on, and what he saw made him stumble backward. There was blood, more than he had imagined. A dark pool near the corner of the bed, smears across the carpet, drops leading toward the closet, and the closet door slightly open. He stared at it, afraid to breathe, afraid to blink. What if she was in there? What if something or someone was? He took one shaky step, then another. The closet seemed to pull him toward it, like it wanted him to open it. His hand reached for the handle, and as soon as his fingers brushed the metal, someone knocked loudly on the front door. Anthony jumped and spun around. The knock came again. "Police! Open up!" His legs moved without thinking. He rushed to the door and opened it. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, hands already on their radios, eyes sharp, scanning the apartment. Anthony stepped aside, breathing fast. "Where's the blood?" the first officer asked. In her room," Anthony whispered. The two officers moved forward quickly. Anthony followed behind them, but each step felt like walking through thick sand. When the officers entered the room, they froze for half a second, just enough for Anthony to notice. Then their professionalism switched back on. "Dispatch, we have confirmed blood at the scene," one officer said into his radio. "Requesting detectives and forensic team immediately." The other officer slowly kneeled near the pooled blood. He didn't touch it. He just looked. His expression tightened. "This doesn't look fresh," he said quietly. "But it's not old either." Anthony didn't know what that meant. His mind was spinning. "Where is Sheila?" one officer asked. Anthony shook his head. "I don't know. I told you, I don't know. She's been missing. I reported it. You said you didn't see this blood before?" "No. But this is her bedroom, correct?" "Yes. She sleeps here. With the baby sometimes. But I don't know when this happened. I don't know anything. I swear." The officers glanced at each other. Then one of them walked to the closet. Anthony felt his chest tighten. He didn't want to see what was inside. He didn't want to know. But he also needed to. The officer slowly pulled the closet door open. The room felt silent. And inside, there was no body. Just scattered clothes, a tipped-over laundry basket, a broken hanger, and a black shoe that didn't belong to Sheila. The officer picked up the shoe with a gloved hand. "This is a men's size," he said. Anthony shook his head. "That's not mine. I've never seen that shoe before." Another officer looked at him carefully. Not accusing, but watching. "So Sheila may not have been alone that night," the officer said. Anthony closed his eyes for a moment. "I told her to leave him," he whispered. "Her ex, the one she was scared of. I told her to leave him." The officer turned. "You think he came here?" "I don't know," Anthony said, his voice rising. "She was scared of him. She told me he was watching her, following her, calling her even when she blocked his number. She said he wouldn't let her go." "We'll need his name," the officer said. Anthony nodded and gave it. The room felt tighter, darker, like the walls were closing in. Anthony kept imagining Sheila in that room, alone, scared, trying to call for help. He imagined someone grabbing her. He imagined the blood. He couldn't keep his hands from shaking. More officers arrived, then detectives, then the forensic team. They worked silently, carefully, photographing everything, collecting samples, marking blood patterns with small yellow-numbered tents. Anthony sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the wall. Minutes turned to hours. The apartment buzzed with voices, cameras, and equipment. He felt like he was watching it all from outside his own body. A detective finally approached him. "Anthony, right?" He nodded. "I'm Detective Lewis," she said, pulling a chair in front of him. She spoke softly but directly. "We need to go through everything you know. Everything Sheila told you. Especially in the days before she disappeared." Anthony took a deep breath. "She told me she felt watched," he said. "She said the ex kept showing up near her job. She said he sent messages from different numbers. She said she felt something was coming." "What do you mean by something?" the detective asked. She didn't know. She said her stomach felt wrong, like danger was close. Detective Lewis nodded slowly, taking note. "Did she say he threatened her?" "Yes," Anthony whispered. "Many times." The detective looked at him carefully. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" "I didn't want to make things worse," Anthony said, his voice cracking. "She told me not to involve the police. She said he'd get angry. She said he'd do something bad." "And you think this something bad happened here?" Anthony looked up, eyes full of fear. "What else could it be? She vanished in her own home." The detective leaned back. "We're not ruling anything out yet." She stood. But before she walked away, she added, "Stay close. We may need you." Anthony nodded, feeling like he was sinking deeper into something he didn't understand. Hours passed. Officers brought out bags of evidence. Fingerprints were lifted from the closet door. A small torn piece of fabric was removed from under the bed. A set of footprints, bare and faint, were traced along the hallway. Every step they uncovered seemed to confirm one thing. Something violent happened that night. But something was missing. Something important. Anthony couldn't shake the feeling. Then one of the forensic techs called out, "Detective Lewis, there's something in the vent." Anthony froze. The detective rushed into Sheila's room. Anthony followed, but she held up a hand to stop him at the door. A tech unscrewed the vent grate slowly. Everyone watched. The flashlight beam moved around inside the small metal space. Then the tech reached in and pulled out a small black phone. Anthony's heart dropped. He recognized it instantly. It was Sheila's. The phone was covered in dust, as if someone had shoved it deep inside, trying to hide it. The screen was cracked. The case was scratched. But it was hers. The detective held it up carefully. "We'll need to power it on," she said. But before they could even attempt it, the tech noticed something else. "Detective, there's more." He reached into the vent again. And this time, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. Crumpled, torn, stained with something dark on one edge. Detective Lewis slowly unfolded it. She read it once. Her eyes widened. She read it again. Then she looked at Anthony. "Did you know about this?" she asked. Anthony shook his head. "What is it? What does it say?" The detective hesitated. Then she held up the paper and read the words written in shaky, terrified handwriting. "If anything happens to me, it was him." Anthony felt the room spin. But before he could say a word, an officer came running from the hallway. "Detective, we just found something outside the building, behind the dumpster. You need to see this now." Everyone froze. Detective Lewis rushed toward the door. Anthony followed, his legs unsteady, his heart pounding. When they stepped outside into the cold night air, officers were gathered around a small taped-off area behind the dumpster. Something was lying on the ground. Something the officers hadn't touched yet. Something dark. Something that made Anthony's stomach twist painfully. Detective Lewis stepped forward and shined her flashlight on the object. And the beam revealed a blood-soaked piece of clothing, one that belonged to Sheila. The detective looked at Anthony. Anthony felt his knees weaken. And then another officer shouted from behind the dumpster, "Detective, there's more. You better come look at this." The detective's flashlight turned slowly toward the deeper shadows. And that's when they saw it. A trail leading away into the darkness. A trail that looked like someone had dragged something heavy. And the trail led straight toward the alley, where a neighbor's door had been left slightly open. The detective raised her gun. "Everyone back," she said. "We don't know who's inside." Anthony's breath caught in his throat. Something or someone was waiting in that dark alley. And the truth behind Sheila's final night was finally starting to show itself. But what they found inside that alley would change everything. The alley was narrow, shadowed, and silent, except for the distant hum of traffic along Lancaster Boulevard. Detective Lewis carefully stepped forward, flashlight cutting through the darkness, while officers fanned out around her, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every corner. Anthony followed behind, his face pale, hands trembling, knowing this was the moment all the fear of the night had been leading up to. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Every step felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was pressing down on him. Then they saw it, the trail of blood. It started near the dumpster where Sheila's blood-soaked clothing had been found. The red smear continued across the cracked pavement, leading toward a rusty metal door that appeared to belong to an old storage shed behind the apartment complex. The door hung slightly open, creaking as the faint wind pushed against it. Detective Lewis gestured to the officers. "Cover all exit. I'm going in." She stepped forward slowly, flashlight held high. The beam illuminated broken crates, scattered cardboard, and shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the walls. Every step echoed. Every sound felt amplified. Then, in the corner of the shed, she saw something that made her stomach twist. A figure curled on the floor. Detective Lewis called out, keeping her voice calm but firm. "Sheila, it's the police. Are you okay?" The figure stirred. Weakly, a hand moved toward the flashlight. A soft groan escaped. Then Sheila's face appeared. Her eyes were open, wide with fear, cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. She was alive, but barely. "Sheila!" one of the officers cried. They rushed forward to help her, gently lifting her into their arms. She clung weakly to one of the officers, shaking, mumbling words that were barely audible. "Anthony, the house." "I tried to leave," she whispered. Detective Lewis knelt beside her, taking in the scene. "You're safe now. You're safe." Sheila's children were still waiting at the apartment, unaware that their mother was finally found. An officer quickly called to bring them, and soon Diego, Camila, and Mateo ran into the alley, their small feet pounding against the pavement. Sheila looked up and faintly smiled through her tears. "My babies," she whispered, reaching out. Diego and Camila ran forward, hugging her tightly. Mateo stayed close to Camila, holding her hand. For the first time in hours, or maybe a day, they felt safe. Meanwhile, the detectives turned their attention to Anthony. He had been the last adult to see Sheila at the apartment, and now, with the truth coming to light, his role was becoming clearer. Detective Lewis asked sharply, "Anthony, explain why you didn't tell us everything. Why you waited until now." Anthony swallowed hard, tears forming in his eyes. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't touch her, I swear. I panicked." Detective Lewis nodded slowly. "Your panic didn't help. But we also found evidence that someone else was involved." She motioned to the officers who had been examining the shed. They had discovered tire tracks outside the alley, matching the dark SUV caught on security cameras. And inside the shed, near Sheila, were signs that someone had tried to restrain her. Rope marks on a crate, shredded fabric from her clothes, and fingerprints that did not belong to Anthony. Anthony's face turned pale. Another person?" "Yes," Detective Lewis said firmly. "We now know Anthony was present, but someone else. Someone she feared was behind the abduction. The person she warned you about, the one she was afraid of. He followed her, and that night, he put her in the shed to scare her, to control her. We found his DNA on the rope. Anthony's knees buckled slightly. Oh my God! With Sheila safely in the hands of paramedics, the team began combing the shed for more evidence. Among the crates, they found her bag that had been stolen from the apartment, her phone with messages pleading for help, and the letters she had hidden outside. Those letters contained names, addresses, and descriptions of the threats she had faced. The evidence was enough to identify the kidnapper. Her ex-boyfriend, Martin Hale, who had a history of stalking and controlling behavior. Police immediately circulated the information. Within 2 hours, Martin was located in a small, abandoned house a few miles away, trying to flee the city. Officers surrounded the building and arrested him without incident. He had no idea that Sheila had been rescued, that his plan had failed, that his control over her was over. Back in the alley, Sheila finally got a chance to sit down on a nearby curb. Officers wrapped her in blankets. Her children sat close, holding her hands. She was exhausted, battered, and terrified, but she was alive. Detective Lewis knelt beside her. "Can you tell me what happened?" Sheila nodded weakly. He came to my apartment," he screamed. "He wanted me to stay, to not call the police. I tried to hide, but he grabbed me. I fought. I screamed, but the kids were sleeping. He dragged me into his car, and I don't know how I stayed alive, but I did." Tears streamed down her face. "I thought I would never see them again." Detective Lewis held her hand gently. "You're brave. You did everything right. We're going to make sure he never hurts you again." Once Sheila and her children were taken to a safe location, officers processed the shed, the alley, and the surrounding area. Tire tracks and footprints were photographed and documented. Blood samples were collected. Every clue pointed to the same story. Sheila had been abducted, restrained, and hidden in the shed. She had been terrified, but she had survived. Her courage, her quick thinking, and her letters had helped authorities locate her before anything worse could happen. Anthony was interviewed further. It became clear that while he had not physically harmed Sheila, he had failed to protect her. His fear of Martin and his hesitation to alert authorities earlier had allowed the abduction to happen. Nevertheless, his cooperation in the aftermath helped police piece together the timeline. The police also recovered Martin Hale's cell phone, which contained text messages threatening Sheila, proving premeditation. His prior stalking history, combined with the evidence from the apartment, shed, and tire tracks, ensured that he would face serious charges. Over the following days, the story spread through Lancaster. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers were relieved that Sheila was safe. The children's school held a small gathering to welcome them back. Teachers praised Sheila's courage, emphasizing how she protected her children even under extreme danger. Forensic experts confirmed that Sheila's rapid thinking had saved her life. The hidden letters, the placement of her phone, and the clues she left behind allowed the authorities to narrow the search and locate her in time. Martin Hale was officially arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including kidnapping, assault, and unlawful restraint. Court proceedings would follow, but for now, Sheila and her children could begin to heal. Weeks later, Sheila finally returned to her apartment, but not to the same home she had left behind. With the help of a local shelter, she relocated to a safer neighborhood. She enrolled her children in a new school, started attending therapy sessions for herself and her children, and slowly began rebuilding their lives. Neighbors described her as strong and determined, saying she had survived something no one should ever experience. Her story became an example of courage and resilience. "I never thought I would see the day I felt safe again," Sheila said in a local news interview. "But I want other women to know they can get help. They can survive. They can protect their children, no matter how scary it gets." Detective Lewis visited Sheila once, to ensure she was safe and knew that authorities would continue monitoring the area. She handed Sheila a folder containing copies of the evidence, along with notes on legal resources and support group. Sheila's eyes welled up with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief, gratitude, and hope. The case of Sheila Cabrera ended with the right person behind bars, her family reunited, and the truth finally revealed. It was a terrifying ordeal, but it also showed the importance of courage, quick thinking, and the power of leaving evidence, even when facing someone dangerous. Lancaster would not forget that summer night. The screams, the fear, and the struggle would remain in people's memories. But the story also left a message. Even in the darkest situations, survival is possible, and those who seek to harm can be stopped. Sheila's children, once terrified in their own home, now slept peacefully every night. Her life was not the same as before, but it was free from fear. And she had a second chance, a chance she would never take for granted. In the end, Sheila survived. The truth of her final night was revealed. Justice was served, and the shadows that once haunted Lancaster were slowly lifted, leaving a community stronger, more aware, and ready to protect those who could not protect themselves.